Welcome to Esports Odyssey, a podcast dedicated to making esports simpler by breaking it down and learning from the best. On this show, we talk to successful people within the esports ecosystem to see what sets them apart from the rest of us. Today, we're joined by Kendric Swissh, a well-known esports commentator, especially in Heroes of the Storm, a former teammate of mine and player, veteran Twitch streamer, and head of community today at WeHype. Welcome on the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I was really a little bit dazzled when you said successful people. Are you sure you got the right person in here?
I think so. Let's see if you're not an imposter. So just to give you a little intro, we usually go and talk mostly about your background. We'll be talking about your story, what got you into games, what got you into esports. We'll talk a little bit about the stepping stones in your career and where you go next. So
cool. I'm super excited.
Awesome. So let's start with your childhood. Actually, what was your first game, and what got you into games?
Oof, man. So I remember back in elementary school, that was in the 90s. I know I'm that old. Shame on me. But in the 90s, one of my best friends back then, they were already into gaming, like him and his father. And they had this really old, I don't know, was it an Atari? No, I don't think it was an Atari. It was a 486. I think that's what it was, like the 486 early Windows 95 PCs. And they were playing Settlers 2, which up to this day, by the way, is a freaking classic. And they were playing that in their basement. And one day, young, innocent Kendrick showed up, and we wanted to go play football outside. But then we kind of stuck inside and checked this game out that his father was playing. So looking behind the shoulders of his father was where my love to gaming was ignited.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what was your first game then? Was that also the first game you played?
I do believe so, because we then switched turns, and then it was his turn, and then it was my turn, and I'd never touched a PC game before. So yeah, I think we took turns, and that was my first experience then.
That's cool. So what about your first online game?
Oof, my first online game, that is really hard to remember, but I really think it might have been Shogun Total War, the very first one that came out, because I remember back then when I played it on my PC, like my PC back then was not my own PC, it was my dad's PC, and it was in the hallway, so they could really monitor me very well, and after an hour they would say, hey, that's enough, back to homework.
I remember those days.
You remember those days too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Shogun Total War 1, which was also the first Total War ever to be made. And then I think I joined a clan, and then we had some Japanese battles going on there.
And you're still a Total War fan to this day, right?
100%. To me, it's one of the greatest series ever made.
So what was the first time you kind of went into this mode where you actually played something competitively? Not necessarily to go pro, but at a LAN party, something where you just wanted to beat some friends. Was that then?
That was probably Diablo 1.
Okay.
Diablo 1 followed by Diablo 2, because those games, like, we didn't obviously have like ladders or a ranked mode back then, because internet was kind of a luxurious thing to have, and you could only have it for a couple of minutes because then the internet bill would explode, because they would charge you per minute, right? So yeah, Diablo 1, and my friends and I, we always would show off our latest copy of our character, which you could then take on a floppy disk, and you would bring it to your friend's place, insert the floppy disk, copy the save file or your character file, and then you would show off and be like, yo, I got this new little set item there, I got the new legendary, watch me, look at me, and look how good I am. So yeah, that was kind of like the first competitive drive between the friends in our clique.
Oh man, you're ancient.
I know.
What were your other hobbies during those days?
I had none. No, I'm just kidding. No, back in the days, I really was never like a hardcore PC nerd that never did anything else in his life. I was hanging out with friends outside, going to the cinema, movies, doing some sports. Like I was big into ping pong, table tennis actually. So I was in a club there. We used to hang out outside, play some basketball. Yeah, so really like a wide variety of things. But when I came home, I always knew like cool. It was cool playing basketball with the kids and all. But when I sat in front of my PC, I knew that this was just the best. This was giving me the most satisfaction.
So when you were playing table tennis, did you attend any tournaments and
Yep.
that sort of thing? Yeah.
Yep, and I felt pretty good about myself back then. But when I talked to my dad a couple of years ago, who of course drove me to all those happenings and all those games, he was like, "Man, I hate to break it to you, Kendrick, but you were pretty shit."
Wow.
Of course, back then he couldn't tell me, right? Because back then he would cheer for me. He would try to hype me up and build me up. But he said I wasn't that good.
Got it. Yeah. Well, sorry. I was also very bad at table tennis. So.
Welcome to the club, man.
So when did you find out about esports? I guess.
Esports, I think the first time I got into contact with anything that resembles today's esports, with teams and pro players and all that, was Warcraft 3. When my friend and I, we played together in a 2-on-2 team, and we at some point met really good players, and at some point we met people from Okrana, which was like a super good team back in the days. I'm not even sure when they stopped existing, but it was relatively early in the history of esports. So we encountered those two players, with a fancy clan tag in front of their names and all that stuff. And we were like, who are these guys? And we looked them up after, and we found out that they were part of a team. And then we did some more research, and we were like, whoa, these guys are really good. And so yeah, that's kind of when I first got into touch with esports players and really good teams.
Okay. So with Warcraft 3, what was your thing? Were you playing competitively? Were you what was happening during that time for you?
So Warcraft 3 up to this day, as you could see in the prep for the show, is still my one of my biggest all-time passions. Like the game is in my opinion so good, so influential, and so nice. So back in the days, everything fascinated me about it. It was especially back then the new take on the RTS genre, introducing heroes for the very first time instead of just having units, like having this extra thing about heroes and leveling them up, combining the RPG element a little bit into this. It just fascinated me. And then you had custom games. You had a map editor, which was super powerful and still is. You had the beautiful campaigns. Like everything about that game fascinated me, and I just wanted more.
I love me some Warcraft 3 too.
Yeah.
So what?
If you don't play on Reforged graphics, it's still a very good game.
So what happened between that moment where you were playing with friends and you first got in touch with esports and you becoming a Heroes of the Storm commentator? What was sort of the path that led you to Heroes?
It was really just hopping from one Blizzard game to the next one. And I'm not saying this in a way that I just tried to get my chances everywhere. It was because I really just enjoyed playing all of them. Moving on from Warcraft 3, I played a little bit of StarCraft 2, although that game never really got me hooked as much. But then it really started all with Hearthstone, I would say. Hearthstone, when that game came out, I was so hyped, I was so hooked, and especially during that time in my life, I didn't have much stuff to do. It was summer holidays at university, so plenty of time to spend. And I thought for funs and giggles, hey, let's just start recording some videos and put them on YouTube, because what the hell else are you going to do with your time? Did that, and it actually got some nice feedback. Some people liked it. Of course, I sold out like crazy and spammed everyone on my Skype list, on my Discord list, and whatnot. Hey, check this video out. things that if you did them today, you would facepalm. You'd be like, "Oh my god, so cringe." But back in the days, that's how you had to do it.
Yeah.
And yeah. And then from Hearthstone on, just following on that path a little bit more, hopped onto Heroes of a Storm because the Hearthstone market got very saturated in terms of, like video content and streaming and all that. So I decided that I would give my shot with Heroes of a Storm, and being a big MOBA nerd following the Warcraft III tradition, and when MOBAs emerged out of that game, I was a big MOBA nerd too. And that's really when everything just was the perfect fit, Blizzard universe, nice game, and MOBA genre, and that was the perfect fit.
Did you play any MOBAs before that? Did you play any Dota?
Dota 1, League of Legends, Heroes of New Earth, and the only one I skipped back in the days was Dota 2.
All of them.
All of them. Did you?
Yeah. I mean, I was a pro player back in Dota, and I played.
Wait, what? Are you kidding me?
And I played Heroes of New Earth competitively too.
Wait, are you legitimately saying you were a pro in Dota 1?
Yeah. I was with Mousesports actually back in the day.
Dude, that's so awesome. Which team did you play for?
Mousesports. So that was with Dreyich. Kuroki was actually there.
I'm Googling that right now.
Kuroki was actually there sometime too. It was a long time ago, like 2005. I don't think
that is so cool.
I don't think the internet from those days even still exists. But we're here to talk about you. So, at which point did esports start being a viable career to you? Or was that not until recently?
So I the first time I made up my mind about esports and potentially pursuing it as a full-time thing was when I was invited to do the Heroes of a Storm Road to BlizzCon 2015, which was kind of like the first real major offline esports gig for the game. Before that, there was a lot of online stuff going on, but that was, especially with the Road to BlizzCon being the biggest event, that was the first time I was like, okay, you know what? If this goes well and you're not messing up entirely, let's just give it a real shot. And I hopefully didn't completely mess up because I was invited to a couple of tournaments after, so I guess I couldn't have been that bad. But in hindsight, when I look at the pictures, my freaking jacket being a little too tall or too big, I did look a little bit like a goof next to all those legends like Grubby, Todd, and Kalaris. So I don't like to look back on those pictures too much. It was a lot of fun though.
Yeah, I mean those were good times. So what do you feel even got you into that position where you did get invited? When did you start when did you first start casting, and why? What was it that led you into the sort of content creation business?
It's hard to say. So before the Road to BlizzCon thing, I was mostly doing stuff in German and really just for fun. So I was casting with a friend of mine, and we're doing some sort of independent underground Heroes Esports Cups, online cups in German. And it was really very grassroots, not a whole lot of budget. Most of the people were doing it for fun and out of pure passion. And I first started realizing that this is actually something I really enjoy when there was the final of one of the German Cups, and it started getting so exciting. I was so sweaty after that, and it all felt like it was a long broadcast. I think we overdid it by 2 or 3 hours. But I was so sweaty and I was so happy at the end of it that was like, man, that's a good feeling. And I kind of want to experience that feeling again, just being proud of what you've achieved, just guiding the players through an entire tournament, getting the viewers excited, and then getting a little bit of positive feedback in chat. That was really, so many areas of my brain I think were stimulated at that point. I was just like high on a cloud, and I was like, that's something I want to experience as much as possible.
That's a very good reason.
Yeah.
And then you ended up actually doing a lot of Heroes of the Storm commentary for a lot of tournaments after the Road to BlizzCon, right?
Yeah, I did a fair share. I wasn't invited to all of them, mind you, because there was a super competitive and a super good roster of casters to draw from in the first place. But I did do my fair share, a couple of Dreamhacks, and then there was an Eastern Clash in Taiwan that I was part of. During the later stages of Heroes of the Storm, I was generally the China expert next to my co-caster Tetcher, so we focused a lot on China and the Asian scene. So that was a really cool take as well, like experiencing the game from a different point of view, a really outcast area almost, that's so far away and secluded from everything else.
And during your career as a commentator, primarily, was there ever a breaking point, like a point at which you felt, oh wow, like I did so well now, compared to before, and what was that?
So the breaking point where I really felt like this was more than just a hobby, it was probably when I got to meet some of the former, or still to this day, idols, quote unquote, idols of mine. When you meet people like Grubby in real life, people that you've been following as a fan or as a viewer for so many years, and you've been admiring their skills and their performance online, or when I got to see Artosis and Tasteless in the hotel lobby, and having breakfast with them and a couple of other lovely people. Like, these are the moments when you're like, I cannot believe I'm actually sitting there, and you really have to contain yourself not to sound and look like a fanboy in these moments, because you're technically speaking one of them. Yep. So that was really the first moment in all these hotel evenings and hotel moments where I was like, damn, this is actually really awesome, and I wouldn't want to miss it.
What about ability-wise? Like your own ability as a commentator, was there a breaking point there?
Yes. I would have to say that this would have probably been during, was it Dreamhack Winter? I think it was during Dreamhack Winter 2016. Please don't quote me on that. It could have been a different Dreamhack, but I was commentating with Wolf, whom many of you may know as an Overwatch commentator at the moment. And we were casting this crazy game together for the first time. We had never seen each other before. We'd never cast together before. So we were casting this crazy game featuring Virtus Pro and, the crazy Russians. They were playing Murky and all sorts of wonky heroes that you normally don't get to see that much. So being there with Wolf, having all this super crazy dorky fun about the strange hero compositions that they chose was really where I was like, man, that probably, if I was a viewer and I listened to the two of us, I would have probably enjoyed the heck out of that. Of course, it's always super hard to tell because sometimes you feel like the greatest caster alive and people in chat are just fail fishing the heck out of their brains. But in that moment, I really felt like it was good casting that we did.
We'd like to thank our partners at Elgato, without whom this podcast wouldn't be possible. They provided much of the equipment used for all of our recording sessions. Elgato is the leading provider of hardware and software for content creators, leveraging decades of experience to develop widely accessible products that empower all creators to produce high-quality, professional content. Elgato has provided us with a reliable 4K 60 Pro capture card, professional keylight lighting, and a customizable stream deck, enabling us to pull off pretty much anything we can think of. Head over to elgato.com to see their full product line. So what got you there, though? When you started, was there anything that you felt that you actually actively worked on, that you actively had to improve on over time?
Yeah, for sure. So remember when I said my first casting gig ever, Road to BlizzCon 2015, my jacket was too big, I looked like a goof. And I also noticed that I was so nervous during my first gig that I started lisping. Something that I normally never do. And I back in the days, I didn't really notice it while I was on camera. I didn't notice it. I looked at the VODs and I was shocked. I was like, is that me? I usually don't lisp. What is happening? What is going on there? So I couldn't believe it. I was in disbelief, and I asked some of my friends who were also watching, like, "Did you guys notice that?" And they were like, "Yeah, that didn't sound like you, man." So I really watched this VOD over and over, and I was trying to recast the situations, record it, and then compare what did I sound like this time. And I basically kept myself kept reminding myself that, not to lisp, try to sound naturally, don't get so excited, don't get nervous. So this was always something I had to fight. And then when I first watched a VOD that I was truly happy with, without any lisping, without any hectic stuttering or nervous looking into the camera, that's where I was like, man, you've done a much better job this time.
Nice. So do you have any piece of advice, like anything that helped you really get to the stage where you besides reminding yourself not to be nervous, how did you get over that?
Yeah. So what I quickly started noticing would help my nervousness was holding something in my hand. So ever since then, I always tried to have like a pen. Even now I'm doing it. Like even now I'm holding a pen in my hand, like holding a pen or some sort of gadget that doesn't look suspicious, and try to find something that calms you down, and most importantly, try to remember that even if you do mess up, or if you were to mess up something, there's so many things happening. Most people probably wouldn't even notice it unless you said something really, really stupid. But so many things that casters think they're messing up with, very few people who are watching even notice it, because there's so much other stuff going on. So I always try to tell people that don't pay too much attention on things that in your eyes don't go well, because chances are many people don't even notice it.
It's good advice.
Yeah.
And during your career as a commentator, did you ever have something like a mentor, like one person that gave you a lot of advice and helped you?
There were many people that provided tips and insight and helped out. So that's something I want to say real quick in general, that I haven't met anyone at tournaments or in between that was truly, how should I say, like unsupportive. All my fellow commentators, people behind the scenes, they were always super supportive, and I think casters, they really try to get the best of each other, because I think a lot of people, when they see casters, they must be thinking like, oh, aren't they competing against each other? Who gets to the next tournament and stuff like that. But the thing is, if you see yourself as a competitor, and you want to be better than everyone else, and you want to make these other casters look bad so you get another job, that's when the whole broadcast is suffering, and that's ultimately what ends up in you losing jobs, because people will notice, man. So shout outs to everybody that I've ever worked with. I haven't found a single person that was not fun. But in terms of mentors, I would probably have to say Kalaris, because he was the driving force behind really getting me into casting on a professional level in the first place. And then, hard to say. I think Kalaris is really the one person that was always there and that would always listen to what I had to say and would also provide really good feedback.
And did he ever give you like one piece of advice that really stuck out to you to this day?
Yeah. So make others look good and you will look good too.
I like that.
Yeah.
And
that's really something, especially for hosts. Oftentimes I feel like I did a lot of hosting towards the end of Heroes of a Storm, so I was more like a desk host rather than a commentator in many events. And I think oftentimes from a viewer point of view, from a fan point of view, I think hosts or desk hosts, they don't get enough appreciation, because people are like, well, they don't say anything valuable. All they do is just repeat stuff over and over. But they're basically the foundation of a broadcast, I would say, and casters and analysts and experts, they can really build up on that. And from what I've gathered, they're really appreciative and grateful for a good host, because it's basically the person that makes them shine.
I mean, it's the same. It's the same for anything else too, right? If you look at esports teams, if you as a player make your other teammates shine, then that's good for the whole team, right?
100%.
And the same goes for literally anything else. I think any job too. It's always about being supportive to your teammates. And I think a lot of people don't see the broadcasting crew as a team, but obviously they are, right? For every tournament, that's your team, and you got to make your team win.
They have to, man.
Yeah.
You win together or you go down together. That's pretty much it, And I like what you said about the games. It's the same drive. It's the same mechanic. And although, let's say you're a support player and you have to make your AD carry shine by any means, the AD carry will most of the time get the laurels, and the fame. But hey, without a strong support, he couldn't have done it.
Yep. And that's why you see most supports ending up to be team captains and the ones forming teams in the long run and actually being the star players.
Yeah, man.
Shout out to Dendi and the like. But yeah. So that was your casting career. What came after that for you personally?
So sadly, most people who were really invested and really engaged in the Heroes of a Storm esports community. Blizzard didn't follow our advice, Nazareth, that we just gave out to the people because they weren't trying to make us shine and support us because they killed the esports, and they didn't really do it in a pretty way. It was more like a overnight decision, it seemed like. Well, of course it wasn't, but it felt like it. And they basically cut off the entire esports program for Heroes of a Storm a couple of days before Christmas. That was, the icing on the cake, really, for all the players and commentary crew.
Yep.
And that really hit all of us really hard. We kind of thought, something was going to happen, but we didn't expect it to be this abrupt and this short notice. And a lot of casters lost their job because of that. I was somewhat lucky in a way because I'd always streamed on the side. I wasn't just fully relying on pure raw esports work. In my spare time, I always did some private streaming, streamed Heroes of the Storm, streamed other games. So I had something to fall back on. And that was basically my main source of income for a couple of years after, just being a full-time streamer, doing some gigs on the side. If someone needed a host or needed a commentator, they could always reach out to me. But yeah, full-time streamer, that was it until I picked up casting and commentating much more again with Warcraft III and Reforged when it came out.
Got it. And then you joined WeHype actually during that same time as a full-time streamer, right?
Yeah. So WeHype is a company, for those of you who have never heard about the crew behind it, that specializes in connecting brands and influencers, content creators, to create really cool sponsored opportunities, that will benefit both the creators and the brands. So I was hooked up through you, actually, my man. I remember that that you hooked me up and said, hey, they're looking for a German-speaking community manager.
Yeah, remember that.
Yeah, so shout outs to you, Nas. Who knows, man? Without you, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast now.
Maybe not.
So I joined WeHype as a part-time German-speaking community manager, and we basically did that on the side for many, many years. And well, only a couple of months ago, they asked me, there was a full-time opening, and they asked me if I wanted to take that over as head of community. And well, there we go. Now I am in Sweden and enjoying the good Swedish life.
Best country in the world.
It really does feel like Sweden is ahead and doing so many things right in many, many ways.
I agree. But that's not the topic of this podcast.
We're not sponsored by the Swedish government. No.
No. Although if they want to sponsor us, they're very welcome to.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you feel, from the beginning to now, what do you feel have been the biggest challenges for you, and you think might be the biggest challenges for others in the esports industry?
I think the hardest thing for people who are trying to make a living in esports full time is that there's no guidelines. Everyone has a different background. Everyone has had a different path in terms of how they got into it. It's not like, you can go to university, study esports for 5 years, leave university with a master's degree, and then boom, you are a fully fledged caster. No, people they come in from being teachers, from being employees of gaming companies, game devs, whatever. They come from all over the world, of all different facets and company sectors, and it's just try to make a name for yourself and try to learn, try to adapt, try to make connections. Networking super important, and that's it. There is no clear guideline. There's only tips you can give people, but there's not a strict rule set they can follow, unlike in other professions. Be the best programmer, and at some point you come up with a sick code or a sick program piece of software that you made, and people are going to pick you up because you're that good.
And I mean, you yourself, you were a teacher before you started all of this full time, right?
True. That is true. Yep.
Very, very different from what you're doing now.
Very different. Although former students of mine, they kept telling me, "Oh, this is so much cooler than teaching at school." And and back then I was like, maybe they're right. But in hindsight, I realized that teaching kids and doing esports or streaming on Twitch, even more, that it has very many things in common. Very, very many things in common.
Okay, please elaborate.
Because I kept telling this to my stream as well. Being a streamer essentially is like being a teacher, just not in front of 20, 25 kids, unless that's your viewer count, but in front of dozens, hundreds, and thousands even of people. Because there are so many people who want something from you, who ask questions, who may not like you, may dislike you because in their eyes you're doing a crappy job or are not explaining things the way they want it to be explained. So you're trying to cater to a lot of different needs, and juggling and balancing them is really the greatest challenge, and I think teachers feel the same way.
So you would say your career actually sort of helped you in achieving what you've achieved?
In many ways, yes. For example, I've always been relatively immune to flaming people or people who just try to insult you on a very personal level, without any constructive criticism, just the classic, like, you're shit.
Yep.
And you're like, well, okay, that's something you might be saying, but why do you think I'm that way? And then usually people have a hard time following up on that. And as a teacher, there's always going to be students who say these things to you sometimes, or who say it behind your back, and you hear it, or something like that. You have the parents coming up to you and trying to defend their righteous children who would never do anything bad in classroom because they're a shiny, innocent beacon of light. Yep. So dealing with this kind of criticism and trying to not let it get to you, and always have a happy face on and have a smile on, that is definitely something that I think helped me for streaming and commentating.
So you would then say that you would equate dealing with online trolls to about the same thing as dealing with an 8-year-old.
Dealing with 8-year-old bullies, yes.
Bullies, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's so how.
And honestly, dude, oftentimes these two groups have a very similar state of mind, or a very similar level of mental maturity.
So if you can give us, it doesn't have to be long. If you can give us a quick introduction to how to deal with an 8-year-old bully right here. Give us a quick lesson.
So I remember on my exchange here at university, I was spending that year in Canada, and I was working at an elementary school in Canada, private school, which of course has a little bit of a different rule set than public schools, because in private schools, the kids are usually from wealthy families and they finance sort of the school, so you had to be particularly nice to these people and to the students, because otherwise, oftentimes, the principal would be like, yo, you don't treat Mrs. Chang the way we want to, she's giving us $50K a year, you're out. And I've seen that. I've witnessed that. So there was this young kid, young boy, really spoiled and really not nice to a lot of people. And classic kid, would show off with money, would be like, my dad is this and my mama does that and I have this much money. Look at me. So at some point, that kid would be very, very not nice to a girl whose family didn't have that much money, and the parents were working really hard to allow her to be on the school. So he was making fun of her, and others chimed in. So I took him by the hand and I took him to the side, and I had this really long one-to-one discussion. And it all turned out that it's really a classic story. Parents didn't pay much attention because they were always busy, always at work, never at home. And that the kid was basically trying to get appreciation and attention from others with this kind of behavior. And I really think that this helps you understand why a lot of people are just being super loud and super noisy online. And if you then just try to be calm, and try not to respond with heat and temper, you will find that either those people get very quiet very quickly, or they might even understand you. And if they still don't understand after that, well, that's basically a whole different topic. Then you would have to think about other stuff. But yeah, just being sincere and taking them seriously, even when they don't say serious stuff, I think has helped me a lot in my personal life.
That's good. I think this is really good advice and a really good learning for a lot of people. Because obviously, not just commentators, but everyone online obviously deals with a lot of heat like that.
Yeah, and you never know what's happening, what's going on in their lives. Maybe someone in their family, has had an accident, or their girlfriend, their boyfriend left them. There's you never know what might be the reason or the trigger point for these people to behave a little bit more aggressively or destructively. I think if you give people the chance to tell you their story, you will learn a lot, and it's more productive than just flat out be like, yo, F you, I'm gonna block you, whatever.
Hey man, I found myself irritable in a game yesterday, and I just had a migraine. So I mean, it can be all sorts of things.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna lie, I definitely had my moments in which I responded or I said something to people in a way that was cocky, impolite. I had those moments too, where in hindsight I was like, man, that was not nice. I shouldn't have responded like that. But I think constantly reflecting and taking a second look at yourself will help so many people.
Yep, for sure. So going back to your career, along your entire career, and I mean, you've been doing a lot of things now, a lot of different things. What do you feel has been one of the key drivers for your success?
It's really hard, man, for me to label myself successful. But
I mean, you're here, you're doing this full time, you've been doing it for a long time now.
That's true. So thank you, Phil Nasworth, for believing in me. Thank you. No, I think the label or good criteria to consider yourself successful with is not necessarily just raw numbers, although of course those are nice, and many people definitely describe themselves as successful according to numbers. But I think it's more like a feeling, like an inner level of peace and happiness that you have while doing stuff. For example, when I commentate these days, or when I work with WeHype and I do my stuff in gaming, in the gaming industry, in the esports industry full time, I reflect upon myself, and I just prepare my dinner at night, and I'm like, man, today was a good day, and I don't worry about days to come, like, oh man, what's happening tomorrow, or I don't really want to go to work tomorrow, I don't want to do this job, I don't want to talk to this customer or whatever. Like if you don't have these feelings, but if you have this sort of happiness and this inner tranquility within you, I think that's when you can be successful, when you can consider yourself successful.
I think what you're describing there is just passion.
Yeah.
It's just passion for what you do, right?
And if that aligns with your dreams of pursuing a career, that's super good. That's probably the perfect case scenario. And not many are blessed to have that. But also it's needed to be said that it took some sacrifices, or it usually takes sacrifices and some risk, or willing to risk to pursue that.
Absolutely. It's I mean, it always takes some risk to deviate from what's normal, right? And
my parents wanted to strangle me when I told them that I'm quitting the teaching background and I want to do esports now. My parents looked at me like an alien. Dude.
I mean, I guess you're also from one of the more traditional parts of Germany, right? So makes sense.
Are you saying the Bavarians are the rednecks of the...
Sort of, yeah. Okay. I mean, Bavaria is the most conservative part of Germany, right?
Probably true.
But anyway, one interesting question I have for you is actually going back to your commentary days, which is, I guess you're still doing commentary now. So is there any type of routine you have? Anything special that you do to get ready for a tournament? Anything that you do, before you're about to cast a match?
I wish I could tell you something really fancy and cool, like going on a meditation or or sending some prayers, to God or something. But no, it's just really like, I guess before we go live, like I try to be really well prepared is probably the best way of saying it. There are some gigs, where you just walk in and you can be improvising and you can be spontaneous and whatnot. But for the most part, I just want to make sure that I did preparation and I got my scenes on OBS. I got everything set up and I got my microphone settings. And I just want to make, in a very calm way, just make sure that everything is prepared and then leave maybe 15 minutes or half an hour in between where you just do just some winding down. And then you go back live, or you come back live.
Okay.
And I think having these moments, and that's more like from an online perspective, right? Because most of the days, these days in Warcraft 3, we have online tournaments that we do from home, especially in the Corona crisis times. But I guess that's also something I try to do offline, at Dreamhacks and ESL events and whatnot. So it's kind of like, once again, like in school, before you write an important test or an important exam. These kids who just try to panic each other up, by, have you prepared this? And do you know what happens if that happens in here in solution to question? But what if they ask this? And they drive each other nuts. And I always try to stay away from that, and same with esports prep. I sometimes just put in my headphones or put on my headphones and I just try to be for me and not get myself attached too much to the hysteria that goes on before.
Okay, that's fair. I think I've equated, even though I'm not a commentator myself, obviously, but I've equated the preparation for commentary, going back to another school analogy here, to doing a presentation, whilst if you don't prepare for your cast, if you don't read up on the teams, if you don't know the histories, it's basically like you just read a Wikipedia article about something and you're doing a presentation based off that, right? And the difference between that and actually reading an entire book on the matter and being able to, if you're forgetting one detail, you have so many other things to pull from, right? So it doesn't matter that you're forgetting one thing. There's still so much more that you can just fill with.
Preach it.
And I think that's definitely important.
Yeah, that is so good and so important what you just said. Like, being able to have a backup topic or a replacement of stuff that you may be forgetting or stuff that you simply may not have an answer to. Following it up with something else worthwhile or a fun little story or an anecdote or something is super important. And there's nothing worse than an awkward silence moment in commentating or something like that. Given it can be a fun instrument of causing some comedy, mind you. That, of course, is a different take. But usually when someone asks you a crisp question or expects you to say something crisp and clean and you don't have anything, man, that's the worst that could happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, having no comeback is definitely the worst.
Yes.
When you're on air,
Yeah.
it's the same in a podcast, right? It's like if you don't know what to say, that is the worst.
Yeah. Have you ever tried doing dead air on a podcast?
No, I haven't.
It's the weirdest thing, man. Just imagine if you asked me a question, Phil, and I didn't have an answer. And both of us would panic, right? Because I would feel uncomfortable and you would feel uncomfortable. And people in these moments, they can't be silent. It's it's super awkward if not. Do you want to try it for 10 seconds? Nobody says anything?
You know what? Luckily we're not live.
Damn it.
So if there were any awkward moments, we could just cut them out. But anyway, okay, so we've talked about your career, we've talked about your past. You were always kind of competitive. I think there was always a lot of passion, as you said, about gaming in general and about the games that you've been into. And now you're still commentating, back to the game that you love so much, and you are the head of community at WeHype. What do you feel is next for you? What is the next big step for your career?
So the next big step for me would be to build something truly amazing. And I think at WeHype, we have the means and the possibilities to do that. Like, I've always been someone who wants to see something grow. I think that's probably the best thing to describe it, because maybe that's the reason why I love playing city builders, or strategy games in general. Maybe I just love seeing how you start up with one worker or how you start up with one tiny village, and over the course of time you have this flourishing city or a huge army that just runs into the opponent's half the map and takes it all. And I think this is something that I want to achieve with WeHype right now, which is really like my main focus, to just build up this platform for streamers and brands to get together, and just one day, sit back and be like, hey, I made this, smiley face.
I think that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think it's always nice to watch things grow, and I think that's That's what a lot of us, I think, in this industry have in common. I think we all feel the same way, not just about the projects that we're working on, but about the industry as a whole. And that's why it's so special to be a part of all. And that's why... And
esports has grown so much, right?
It has.
Compared to even 5 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. It's crazy how this basement phenomenon of sweaty nerds is sitting in front of 10-kilogram monitors, has turned into this stadium atmosphere.
Look, when I was playing Dota League, when I was playing, what was it called? The MYM Pride tournaments in Dota back in the day, that Twitch was not even on the horizon back then. People watched matches in GG Client, which is now rebranded as Garena, and they're actually a massive publisher in Southeast Asia, right? So a lot of things have changed, and a lot of things have changed for the better, for sure. And it's beautiful. It's been beautiful to watch this grow. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years. You've been doing it for 5 now? Ish?
Full time, yes.
Yeah. So it's been a wild ride, and I think it's going to be for quite some time.
Man, I think this is still just the beginning. I still think that as soon as we're in our 40s, 50s, 60s even, not only do I think will there be a whole new market for these players or for these people, like I'm convinced that at some point we're gonna have senior esports or elderly games that can be played competitively in their own way.
Yep.
But then our grandchildren, our children, they're gonna grow up with this, and they're gonna see when they hear the name pro gamer, it's something that their eyes will sparkle, instead of being like, what did you just say? Pro gamer? You want to be a pro gamer? No, hell no.
Exactly. And I think that's actually almost it for my questions for the day. I have two questions that we always like to ask each of our guests as sort of the closing questions.
Okay.
I'll start with one that is much more aligned with your commentary, which is if you had the choice between having 5,000 concurrent viewers on your own channel or 50,000 on another channel, but you're there, you're putting on the show, which one would you choose?
Oh my God, that is a hard nut to crack. Oof. I would probably go with the 50K.
Okay.
Because I think, despite me at some point, like I've been a full-time streamer for several years now, before I actually went to Sweden and all that. But like, it's hard to describe. I think just being on the big stage in front of a massive audience would personally give me more satisfaction and more pride to look at in hindsight. Than a 5K personal private stream, which by no means is a shabby thing. Like, that's still amazing. Like, you're basically, Naz, you're trying to make me choose between vanilla cupcakes and freaking gummy bears. Both are so good. But I'd take the 50K simply because I would have this moment of, man, I did that.
That makes sense. I mean, I had this conversation with my girlfriend actually the other day.
Yeah.
And I was explaining to her how people, when it comes to Twitch, people never really associate numbers with what it really means, right? Like having 20 viewers is not shabby, right? Imagine 20 people standing behind you while you're playing games and watching you. And then imagine 5,000 people. That's a hockey arena. Right, that's an ice hockey arena full of people.
Yeah,
and then 50,000 people. That's a football stadium. Most football stadiums can't even fit that many people. That's
and
how many.
They will probably
people
never get that many people in many stadiums. Yeah,
exactly. So it's a massive feat either way.
Yeah.
And my other question for you is, if you were given one tweet that had a guarantee of going viral, what would you tweet?
If my next tweet was guaranteed to go viral, what would I post?
Yep.
I would probably post something along the lines of, people, like, especially in these days, with the freaking corona ravaging and keeping so many people under lockdown and stuff. Dude, I would just love to see that newspapers and media, even in dire times, would focus a little bit more on positive news. So that's what I would share, focus more on positive news, because I really think it affects so many people. And also, cats greater than dogs. I just said it.
Wow. That's a controversial thought here to end the show.
I had to get it out there. I'm a cat man.
Let's not talk about pineapples and pizza. So I want to give you the chance to sort of have the last words. If there's anything that you want to share with the audience, maybe about WeHype, about what you do, anything that you want to share in general. I just wanted to give you that last chance.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, first of all, just thank you for having me on the show, Naz, and everyone at Challengermode. It feels good to be in Sweden with a lot of fellow awesome esports and gaming people. So shout outs to you guys for having me. Thank you so much. Also shout outs to WeHype, who basically provide me with a tremendous chance of just achieving something truly great and making a lot of people happy, influencers, content creators, and brands alike. So shout outs to them, and you should definitely check them out. If you're a streamer, if you're a pro gamer with a following, or if you're a brand, WeHype.it is the place to be. Aside from that, shout outs to my girlfriend who is sadly not in Sweden yet. She's still in Germany because of the coronas and all that. Haven't seen her in a long time, and I hope she's doing well. She's a teacher too, by the way. Fun story. And I think in Germany they've now made the decision that schools will resume in some areas, and sadly she's affected by it. So yeah, best of luck to you, my dear, and I love you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Kendric, and
Thank you guys.
we'll hear from you soon. Thank you for listening to Esports Odyssey. If you enjoyed this episode, you can follow Challengermode on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, where we announce all new episodes and share podcast-related news. You'll find all of our socials in the show notes. Feel free to email us at podcast@challengermode.com if you have any questions from this or any other episodes, or if you would like to learn more about Challenger Mode and what we do.